At first glance, the landscape looked calm, almost too calm. A wide stretch of open land rolled out beneath a pale morning sky, the kind of quiet that tricks you into lowering your guard. Frost still clung to the grass, crunching softly under every careful step. Somewhere far beyond the hills, unseen and unheard, something massive was moving. This was not an ordinary hunt. This was the kind of situation where one mistake could cost lives, equipment, and months of preparation. The kind of hunt where distance wasn't just a number. It was the greatest enemy. Wild boars have been terrorizing this region for months. Crops destroyed overnight. Fences crushed as if they were made of wire. Farmers waking up in fields that looked like war zones. These weren't small animals wandering too close to human land. These were giants, aggressive, intelligent, and unpredictable. And one of them was out there now. The team had received reports of a massive boar, far larger than anything normally seen in this area. Some farmers claimed it stood shoulder-high to a grown man. Others said it charged tractors without hesitation. At first, officials thought it was exaggeration. Fear tends to grow stories. But the tracks told a different story. The footprints were enormous, deep, heavy. Each step pressed into frozen soil like a warning. The shooter lay prone on a rocky ridge, barely visible against the terrain. His rifle was carefully positioned, adjusted millimeter by millimeter. Wind meters flickered softly. Calculations were whispered under breath. This was not a shot you rushed. 504 meters. At that distance, the bullet wouldn't fly straight. Gravity would pull it down. Wind would push it sideways. Even the rotation of the earth could affect the trajectory. Every variable mattered. Below, the valley stretched endlessly. Trees cast long shadows. And then movement. A dark shape emerged near the edge of the field. The boar. Even from this distance, its size was unmistakable. Thick shoulders. Heavy tusks catching faint light. It moved with confidence, completely unaware it was being watched. Completely unaware that every breath it took was being measured. No chase. No barking dogs. No chaos. Just silence. The shooter slowed his breathing. Heart rate steady. Finger resting near the trigger, but not yet committed. One wrong calculation, and the bullet would miss by meters. Worse, it could wound instead of stop. And wounding a giant wild boar at this distance? That would be a nightmare. The wind shifted slightly. Someone whispered, "Hold." Seconds passed. Long seconds. The boar stopped moving, lifting its head as if sensing something. But not danger. Not yet. This was the moment. 504 meters of open air stood between hunter and target. No second chances. No follow-up shots. Just one pull of the trigger to decide whether this hunt would go down in history or become a disaster no one will forget. The rifle settled. The crosshairs floated, not on the boar but far above it. And then the shot broke the silence. The sound of the rifle echoed across the valley, sharp and final, tearing through the morning silence like thunder ripping open the sky. In that exact moment, time seemed to slow, stretching every heartbeat into something almost unbearable. The bullet was already gone. Traveling faster than sound, it cut through the cold air, spinning violently, fighting gravity, wind drift, and distance all at once. At 504 meters, this was no simple trajectory. The bullet dropped rapidly, descending through invisible layers of air pressure, temperature changes, and crosswinds that could shift its path by inches or miss entirely. The shooter didn't move. He stayed locked in position, eyes glued to the scope, breathing shallow, knowing that moving too soon could ruin the follow-through. Around him, no one spoke. Even the wind seemed to hesitate. Down in the field, the boar reacted, not to the sound, but to instinct. A split second before impact, the massive animal lifted its head, muscles tightening, sensing something wrong. Its hooves dug into the earth as it shifted weight, preparing to run or charge. No one could tell which. Giant wild boars didn't flee like normal animals. Sometimes they ran straight at the threat, and that was the danger. At this distance, there was no way to stop what had already been set in motion. No way to correct. No way to warn. The bullet was committed to its path, and the boar was committed to survival. The impact landed with a deep, hollow sound, more felt than heard. The boar staggered. For one terrifying second, it didn't fall. Dust exploded beneath its hooves as it lurched forward, raw power driving it ahead despite the hit. A wounded boar at close range was deadly. At long range, unpredictable beyond belief. Even now, the animal could disappear into the trees, injured, furious, and more dangerous than ever. "Did it hit?" someone whispered. Through the scope, the shooter watched closely. The boar's movement slowed. Its massive shoulders dipped. The charge lost momentum, turning into an unsteady stumble. Every step sent shock waves through its body, its strength draining with each breath. Then it collapsed. The ground shook as the giant fell, tusks cutting into the soil, the earth absorbing the weight of an animal that had ruled this land unchecked for far too long. Silence returned, but it was different now. Heavy, emotional. No one celebrated. Not yet. The shooter stayed in position, tracking the target for several long seconds. Experienced hunters knew better than to assume. Boars were notorious for sudden recoveries. Some could stand back up minutes later, fueled by adrenaline and rage. But this one didn't move. The radio crackled softly as confirmation came through from observers positioned closer to the field. The shot placement was precise, perfectly calculated, perfectly executed. A shot many experts would call impossible had just been completed under real-world conditions. 504 meters. Not from a shooting range. Not from a controlled environment. From uneven ground, with shifting wind, against a moving, living target. Word would spread fast. Farmers who had lived in fear for months would finally sleep easier. Fields would recover. Fences would stand. Livestock would roam without constant threat. One animal had caused massive destruction, but its end marked a turning point. As the team prepared to move closer, the weight of what had just happened began to sink in. This wasn't just another hunt. This was proof of patience, discipline, and respect for the risks involved. Proof that skill, not luck, had made the difference. But the story wasn't over yet, because when they finally approached the fallen boar, they realized just how massive it truly was. And what they discovered next would shock even the most experienced hunters. As the team slowly descended into the field, every step felt heavier than the last. From a distance, the boar had already looked enormous, but up close, reality hit far harder than anyone expected. The ground around it was torn apart, deep hoof marks carved into soil like scars from a battle that had gone on for years. This was no ordinary wild boar. Its shoulders rose like a wall of muscle, thick hide layered with mud and old scars. Clear signs of past fights, past escapes, past victories. The tusks curved outward, long and brutal, worn smooth at the tips from constant use. These were the weapons that had destroyed fences, ripped irrigation lines apart, and injured livestock without mercy. Even the most seasoned hunters went quiet. Someone finally broke the silence. Now I understand why the farmers were terrified. Measurements were taken carefully. The distance was confirmed again, 504 meters. Wind readings reviewed. Angle checked. Everything matched. The shot that many would have dismissed as reckless had been executed with precision few could achieve even on a controlled range. The bullet placement told its own story. A near-perfect hit, accounting for drop, wind drift, and movement. A fraction of an inch off, and the outcome would have been very different. The boar could have escaped, wounded and enraged, disappearing back into forest to cause even greater destruction. But that didn't happen. Instead, this moment became proof of what discipline, patience, and deep understanding of ballistics could accomplish. This wasn't about bravado. This wasn't about luck. This was the result of years of experience compressed into a single, irreversible trigger pull. Nearby, farmers began to arrive. Their reaction said everything. Relief washed over their faces as they stood near the animal that had haunted their nights. Crops trampled season after season. Repairs made again and again. Losses that insurance never fully covered. For them, this wasn't entertainment. It was survival. One farmer quietly placed his hand on the broken fence line nearby and nodded. Maybe now we can breathe again. But the story carried a deeper lesson. Across many regions, wild boar populations had exploded beyond control. With few natural predators left, these animals adapted fast, growing larger, smarter, and more aggressive. Farmers weren't just fighting pests anymore. They were facing an invasive force capable of reshaping entire landscapes. And that raised uncomfortable questions. How far could things go if nothing was done? How many farms would be lost? How many people would be hurt? This hunt wasn't a celebration of violence. It was a warning, a reminder that when nature falls out of balance, the consequences become extreme. That managing wildlife responsibly isn't optional. It's necessary. And that every decision, every shot, carries weight far beyond the moment itself. As the sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the field, the team packed up in silence. No cheers, no triumph, just reflection. Because moments like this don't happen often. A 504-meter shot against a massive, destructive force. A single decision made under pressure. A line drawn between chaos and control. And somewhere out there, in fields still untouched and forests still deep, other boars were moving, watching, learning, adapting. This one story had ended, but the battle between farmers and nature was far from over, and the next encounter might be even more dangerous.